That's right, another day, and we've got joint practice to talk about as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 202. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I sit down with Ben Fennell and Chris McPherson. We've got two more training camp practices to break down. This one against the Baltimore Ravens. Let's get to it now. Everything that happened over really the last few days in Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
So a hot one out there today. I'm feeling a little soupy, a little damp at the moment.
I don't know what to feel. It's air conditioned inside. It's hot outside. My body's all over the
right
place.
now in the studio. But before we get into the show, because we're going to cover a few things here on the podcast. Number one, we've got two practices we'll kind of recap some notes with both today and yesterday. Plus the Eagles' preseason matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll show a couple little thoughts, a few takeaways from there since you guys haven't heard from us in a few days. But let's start here today, C-Mac. The Baltimore Ravens in town, first of two joint practices. It was hot outside, mid-afternoon, and they went right into it because after like individual stuff and warm-ups, it was a run period. Like they went right after each other. It was great to see. No fights today. It was physical. It was competitive.
Very physical. Yep.
But it didn't spill over. It was a really good competitive practice.
No, it's a great defense to go against.
No doubt.
A very tough, hard-nosed defense, and that's what you're looking for. Malcolm Jenkins spoke after practice, and it's not trying to be more macho than the other team. It's trying to get good work, good looks against another squad because you look at the starters in this preseason, they really haven't played a whole lot,
right,
if they played at all. So this extensive work, today and tomorrow is probably going to be the most that they'll get against an opposing team leading up to September 8th against Washington. So, and it's not just, any type of team. It's a tough, hard-nosed, well-coached John Harbaugh football team with the Baltimore Ravens coming in. It was we got to watch the offense, throughout the course of the day.
Stuff, yep.
But it was just a great test for the offensive line. You see the depth tested along the offensive line. You're seeing the corners, those big, tall, long, physical corners. Goodness gracious. Getting up against Alshon and the Eagles receivers. And you're seeing some of the young guys step up to the plate, and you're seeing some of the best, like Zach Ertz, showcase why he's one of the elite tight ends in the game.
Yeah, and we didn't see, like you said, we didn't see much of the defense. So there's three practice fields. The defense, meaning the Eagles defense, matched up against the Baltimore offense on the middle field. So we didn't have a great vantage point. Ben, I know you walked over there a little bit. So when they were doing red zone work, you did get some eyes on those guys. We'll get your thoughts on that in a little bit. But overall, we were watching the Eagles offense against the Baltimore defense, and I agree, good physical unit to get paired up with for the next couple days.
Yeah, but it was productive. And it's great when you have two teams that are both trying to work on things and have productive practices. These are two playoff teams.
Yep.
They're both in the playoffs last year. They have some mix of young players, but there's some veteran presence on both teams. And you don't want those practices where you're just dusting it up and fighting every other rep, because then the whole practice is a waste. You're not getting the work in you really need to. Seemed like Baltimore really want to come in and have a competitive practice against a quality team like we are in the Philadelphia Eagles, vice versa. I saw a lot of feistiness, but it never kind of got over the line. It was never to a detrimental kind of level.
Yeah, no question. I think that was a big part of it.
I was going to say it was great from the start because you could tell that both teams were amped and ready for this practice.
I think both teams were excited for it.
They were excited. You could hear it even while the Eagles players were stretching and getting ready for practice. You heard a lot of talking and amongst themselves, not chirping at the Ravens, but talking amongst themselves. Malcolm Jenkins breaking down the huddle, right before the team period got underway. You could tell that it was like, okay, they came knowing that it was going to be a different atmosphere, a different intensity to
even like special teams periods. I was out there for the Eagles kick return against the Baltimore kickoff team, and I mean it's not like friendly contact when those guys. It was a lot of like pad on pad, like really good thumping, and the Eagles actually busted off a couple nice returns in that drill, which was good to see.
And the great thing is, even though they're not tackling to the ground, you still hear coaches chirping to finish and to play with intensity and to come off the ball firing, and it's still the same coaching points. And the second we got out to practice, there's going to be a tone setter out there. Who's going to go set the tone for the day? I think it was the second or the third play. Earl Thomas came and thudded Jordan Howard, put him on his butt, and I said, oh no. Is this going to be one of those days, one of those practices? It was very early in practice, a veteran presence like Earl Thomas. All right, he's setting the tone for how this is going to go, but it never obviously went over the line to any sort of scuffles or fights or anything like that. Just a very physical, feisty practice between two competitive teams.
Yeah, and like I said, I thought it was interesting that they started with a run period. It's not like, we'll kind of ease into the
It's normally
contact.
a build-up to the more physical sessions.
They went right into the run period. They had a run period. They had 7-on-7. There was run pass. They had a couple different situations worked in there. It was really it was a fun practice. And look, with the weather, it was not an offensive day. We didn't see anything from the defensive field. I have no idea how Baltimore's offense did against the Eagles' defense, but it's tough to when it's that soupy out there to get things going. I would say a couple of notable plays for the Eagles' offense. There was a really nice deep ball from Carson Wentz to Alshon Jeffrey down the field, and then there were a couple nice throws over the middle as well. He completed one to Zach Ertz between multiple defenders. Nice route by Deshaun Jackson along the sideline, creating separation. So you saw some throws from Carson Wentz. And even from Clayton Thorson as well. We'll talk about that in a bit.
We can talk about that in a bit. I was going to say Clayton Thorson, I feel like the last 2 days
no question.
has just looked so much more comfortable.
Yes.
And I actually was talking to him a little bit after practice, and I said, look, at the time Thursday night, that probably wasn't the ideal scenario where you want to go in for an injured Cody Kessler and play basically the majority, but basically the entirety of the entire game. But you get all that experience. Not for nothing, you look a lot more comfortable. And he said, again, it wasn't the scenario he wanted to come in at, but getting those reps under his belt gives him the confidence, and he's gone out there and he's ripped it the last couple of days.
And conversely, it gives the coaching staff confidence in him to maybe give him a couple more reps, get that third-team quarterback in there, or fourth-team, or whatever you want to call him. But now the coaches have seen, the live bullets out there in the game and some throws, and to have the composure in the moments like he had, that just gives me confidence in that player, and to maybe see a little bit more on the practice field and keep building off of that.
Look, Sunday was a 10-10-10, right? Now we know that you always want to couch it with that. You don't want to go overboard with what you see in a 10-10-10. He threw it better in that practice than I think I've seen, even going back to, because I watched him for 2 years in college, his junior year and his senior year at Northwestern.
We're going college tape
he
here.
He looked really good on Sunday. I thought that was probably the best I've seen him in maybe since that junior season. Which was really good to see. And then he threw it well again today. I mean, he had a couple touchdowns in the first red zone period, and then towards the end of practice, he threw one to J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and another one to Mark and Michelle. The one to Michelle in particular, that ball came out really early. I mean, he put it in a perfect spot right along the sideline, over a defender, outside where only Michelle could get it. He just looks more confident, more comfortable back there.
Number 39, getting toasted both times for the Ravens on that. But still, great throws on both of them. Arcega-Whiteside was more of a contested catch on like a fade route down the sideline there for the touchdown in the red zone drill. And you mentioned the anticipation throw to Michelle. So, it was just great throws. I mean, we're seeing Josh McCown. Okay, that's
I was just going to bring him up.
Yeah, that's a big news. Him coming out of retirement to sign a 1-year deal with the Eagles, giving the Eagles that much more veteran presence, experience, adding to depth at the quarterback position, because with the injuries to Sudfeld, with Cody Kessler, who was at practice today, so he's making steps from coming out of the concussion protocol, but still you didn't know how long he was going to be sidelined for. You want to make sure that behind Carson Wentz, that spot is solidified, and bring in a guy who's going into his 18th year of professional football, 17th in the NFL. I think it's 12 teams, including something the UFL. It's amazing. But what's been great to see, even behind the scenes, him interacting with players all over the locker room. He and Alshon Jeffrey already have a tight connection from their time in Chicago. They're very, very close. But Josh is, very quickly making friends and ingratiating himself into the locker room like a veteran would. And then during the stretching part of practice, he and Carson were side by side, going down the field, talking in each other's ears. So that's what he's here for, to provide, Carson that sounding board, to provide support. And Carson being in his fourth year, obviously, he doesn't need, but it's nice to have someone to rely on, to not have to be, the elder statesman in the room, so to speak.
Yeah, and also to teach Nate, hey, this is what it takes to be a backup quarterback. And I think, you made the point, like during stretch period and in the locker room, like I'm watching him during practice on Sunday. He was attached to the hip to Carson. When Carson wasn't in there, McCown was right next to him. And then today, in between reps, he was constantly going back, talking to Doug. All right, what do I need to do here on this one? All right, boom. Then the next play, he was in. They was constantly going back and forth, and you would expect that kind of communication.
Well, that's like 90% of what he's working on here.
Right.
There isn't a handoff or a run concept he hasn't executed. There isn't a pass concept he hasn't seen before. It's just the rapport with the players around him, the terminology in Doug Peterson's offense, and just having that relationship and the communication with everybody. There's a couple clunky snap counts today, a couple clunky snaps exchanged with the centers. That's what he's working on. The just different details with players he hasn't worked with. The offense, the scheme, the pass concepts, the routes, the handoffs, the footwork. He's been in the league for 18 years. He's got that all down. Now it's just working with people he hasn't worked with, getting the terminology down, and just being comfortable with the players he's around.
A couple other notable things from Sunday. Nigel Bradham returned to the field, 7-on-7 action. I don't know, did either of you guys see anything from him? Not yesterday, but did those guys practice again today? I was because Ronald Darby also joined
Nigel
11
yesterday.
on 11.
The second I noticed him out there, he had a PBU, and then he ran down the field, kind of down the deep seam the very next play, and said, "Oh, Nigel looks pretty good running around out there." So nothing else too eventful or of a note, but just good to see him out there with the unit.
Ben, anything, because I know you, so typically, all right, a little behind the scenes here, we're watching practice together, we're watching, but since there was double the action today, you had stuff going on both fields. A couple of times, Ben and I, you and I split up. So when you went over to the other side, I know you were there for one-on-ones, I believe, some of the defensive action. Anything that C-Mac and I didn't see?
I saw some of the Baltimore Ravens D-line against our offensive line. I thought they were very intense. They have some very stout bull rushers. They have a big kid, Dalen Mack, who can really handle some of the smaller interior offensive linemen.
Well, I was going to say a big man is like an understatement.
Pernell McPhee is a very interesting pass rusher. He's kind of an edge body, but he's strong and powerful to go up against guards as well. He kind of flew through a big V on a play and was one of the more vocal guys in getting his group kind of animated. I thought Mulata looked very good in one-on-ones, but you're pretty exposed in those situations. He has no help. He has no chipping. So it's just straight one-on-one. You're as naked as you're ever going to be as a pass protector. I thought he did a very good job.
Nice.
I don't remember seeing any real lapses in the pass protection on those one-on-ones. And then Baltimore's offense, very interesting group of skilled players working in Justice Hill, a variety of tight ends. You know, Mark Andrews had a really nice touchdown over Sidney Jones in the red zone towards the end of practice there. And Lamar Jackson. The ball just comes out differently with Lamar Jackson. It doesn't have a whole lot of
snaps out.
It doesn't have a whole lot of arc. There isn't a whole lot of trajectory, but that ball flies out of his hands. These things are lasers, and they get from A to B in a hurry. Sometimes a little bit late in the read. A lot of it like McNabb, how McNabb used to play. Maybe a count late, but that ball was coming out hard, low, and usually pretty on point. Just different velocity was coming out of his hands.
Schematically, a lot of the same stuff you and I saw watching them preseason.
Yeah,
There's
pretty
a lot
much.
Of, Carolina option football.
Yep, there's going to be some zone read stuff, some triple option elements, trying to get some speed option as well. A lot of moving pockets and some bootlegs, trying to get Lamar on the perimeter as
Something to
expected.
expect when fans are watching on Thursday night.
But the interesting mix is this offense is kind of like Auburn in that they have some finesse and some speed, but this is a big offensive line, and they'll work some power football. So there's a lot of power read elements where you're pulling a guard and zone reading. It feels like Auburn. I don't want to call it college offenses because you see this all over Sundays nowadays, but just very interesting mix to have the speed element, the perimeter players, but the big offensive line, Ronnie Stanley, Orlando Brown, some big fellas.
So that's what you can expect to see from Baltimore in the Eagles' third preseason game. Let's quickly talk about just some takeaways. Nothing crazy. We're not going to dive too deep into what we saw from last Thursday night, but overall thoughts, takeaways. For me, I thought it was a good showcase for a lot of the Eagles rookies. We saw a couple really nice runs from Miles Sanders. I thought Andre Dillard had another solid game. Sharif Miller made some plays in the backfield. Clayton Thorson, I thought, look, he didn't light the world on fire against Jacksonville, but I thought that just a really good, efficient game. And again, just taking that next step, just continuing to look more and more comfortable.
Well, the growth from game one to game two.
No question.
Okay, because it looked like the lights were a little too bright for him in the first preseason game, and whether it was just the nerves or just the energy, just not able to contain it. Had some high throws, but what you heard from Press Taylor was he made the right reads, just didn't get the ball there, and that's a good sign. At least he's understanding the offense. Now he's getting a little more comfortable where he's able to put everything together. And the nice touchdown throw to Greg Ward had a couple, number of nice throws. He overall ran the offense quite well throughout the course of the game. I was very pleased with what I saw.
Ben, I know when we were watching, you were excited about just seeing the veterans on defense. So you saw the Brandon Grahams, the Malcolm Jenkins, the Malik Jacksons.
Brandon Graham definitely flashed, and that poor right tackle, whoever was out there, man, he really had his number. It seemed like a lot of those plays.
Everybody had his number
Malcolm actually beat Brandon to the ball carrier on a couple plays. He got an unblocked. Brandon had to get through the blocker first, was a count late, but Brandon was right there. But forget the veterans. I was interested in watching first-round pick versus first-round pick. This is Andre Dillard against top 10 pass rusher Josh Allen from the University of Kentucky over at Jacksonville. I thought Dillard did a great job against him, handling in pass protection.
Only a handful of reps because
they didn't go against each other a whole lot.
Side.
Obviously, I don't think Josh Allen played a whole lot in the game in general, but
I agree, though.
In the run game, just the subtle movement in pawing those defensive ends off the ball and really watching where their feet start and where their feet finish. That's something I was really interested in seeing in Dillard. And even Mulata. Mulata had a couple snaps against Josh Allen. We know 10-plus sacks in the SEC, top 10 pick. Jordan Mulata, second year ever playing football. Listen, he tossed him on a play.
Very early.
He got
absolutely like the 4th or 5th play.
Tossed up the field. And then he settled down. I thought he handled him and looked very comfortable, and he looked the part of an NFL right tackle against a speedy edge rusher from the SEC. I just felt like that's the type of competition that's going to get both of them better. And I thought they both they handled their assignments.
To me, like the run play of Dillard versus Allen was most impressive because, we all talk about Josh Allen, great pass rusher, all that. To me, when I watched Josh Allen the last 2 years, I liked his ability to set the edge. Like he was a very versatile player, so his ability to hold up at the point of attack, I thought was pretty good. Dillard moved him a couple times.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw him displace him. I thought that was really good to see.
Going back to pass protection for a second. Miles Sanders. You go to the
question.
You go to the 4th down touchdown pass. Mentioned already Thorson to Greg Ward. Well, it was Miles Sanders with the pickup
good call.
that allowed Thorson to have that extra second to be able to get the ball there, and that's what's going to get Sanders and keep Sanders on the field. Obviously, his talent as a running back, his ability to catch the ball in the backfield, very impressive so far in camp and preseason. But the coaches want to be able to trust you in pass protection on those key 3rd downs. Miles Sanders is showing up in that phase of the game so far.
So
and he did that play with some attitude too. That's one of those that you typically want to watch the trenches from the end zone behind the offense. That's one you want to watch from the sideline because you just see the linebacker absolutely stopped in his tracks, and he really put a lick on him there.
The forward momentum just completely ceased.
Absolutely.
So we mentioned Sharif Miller. Some of those other young defensive linemen also stood out. Deshaun Hall continued to flash. Josh Sweat had a couple nice plays. Trayvon Hester showed up. So it was good to see a bunch of those young guys continue to make plays. Deshaun Hall, another really good night.
I don't know what they're going to do with defensive end. We keep talking about, okay, you've got your top 3 in BG, Vinny, and Derek Barnett, however you want to stack them. That 4th spot feels wide open, and Deshaun Hall feels like he's really playing himself into possibly being that guy for the Eagles. And again, look, Josh Sweat has had a very good training camp, and he's flashed in the preseason. It's not like he's completely disappeared off the map, but Deshaun Hall has really taken his game to another level here in the preseason.
All right, so Ben, you got one more final thought before we move on?
Yeah, just collective thought about the roster, and sometimes it gets to be some tough decisions. Is it this receiver, this edge rusher, that edge rusher, and we kind of hate to see some players go. These are good problems to have.
Right.
And I don't like to look at this as any sort of negative and we have some tough decisions. These are good problems to have. There's some players in Eagle uniforms right now that are going to play some meaningful snaps for other teams this year.
Right.
And these are just good problems to have. This is what happens when you have competitive rosters and you're consistently winning. I think this is just things to get used to around here, and we're going to keep stacking the bottom of those depth charts, and we're not going to be able to keep them all. But the fact that we have competitive players and it's tough choices on the bottom of the roster.
You'd rather have that than the opposite.
Exactly.
Right.
That's exactly what you want.
So before we move on to the next part of the show, really, again, the number one way to support this show, go on to wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, wherever it is, leave us a rating and leave us a comment. Tell a friend. We appreciate the word of mouth as well when it comes to supporting our shows. But any support you can give us. If you've enjoyed these daily podcasts from training camp, a lot of you have gone on to iTunes and left comments. Continue to do so. Go and let us know how we're doing with these daily pods. We've got this one, and then tomorrow, and then that's it. Training camp, in terms of the media's portion, is over. So that will be the end of the daily podcast. However, we've got my third and final NFC East preview. I talked with Bob Stern from The Athletic about the Dallas Cowboys. That'll drop on Wednesday. So we've got 3 more shows. We got this one. We've got tomorrow, the final training camp recap, and then Wednesday with Bob Stern. Then we return with Greg Cosell on a weekly basis for the regular season, which will be a lot of fun.
What are you doing next week?
I think I've got an idea for next week. I don't want to say until it's official. I think I've got an idea for next week. So we'll get to that. But like I said, a lot of you have done a really good job of going on and left comments and questions. And I've got 2 questions here from listeners. First one, Donnie Boy 94. What game this year do you see as being really close outside of the division? Because the division games are always close. So outside of division, what do you see as the tough games for the Eagles? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my handy dandy Eagles official app because I know that the schedule is really readily available.
You don't have it memorized at this point?
No, I don't have it memorized. I know we play Washington week 1. That's about all I got.
I will look at Atlanta in week 2 because I think a lot of fans are thinking, oh, we've had their number.
They're basically a division team. We play them in Green Bay every year.
Every single
year. I think it was
year.
Atlanta, Detroit, Green Bay. Kind of an interesting 3-week span there in non-division games.
So we play Washington, Atlanta, Detroit, Green Bay.
Now Atlanta's prime time. I think it's Sunday night.
Yes, I believe that
and
is
into
correct.
the Jets and into the Vikings. Interesting little stretch of non-division games.
So right there off the bat, you hope you get off to a strong start against Washington, get that win in the division, get to 1-0 in front of the home crowd. The Atlanta game is going to be tough. I mean, again, you go back to we knocked them out of the playoffs in the Super Bowl year. We opened as the Super Bowl champions with another tough win to start off 2018. This is a team though that pretty much brings the same roster consistently year in and year out. Matt Ryan's still one of the better quarterbacks in the game. You still got, keep Julio Jones in check, even though we've been able to survive those 4th downs the last couple seasons.
So a case on a couple of these. New England.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So you come by
like,
from the bye. They have a week 10 bye. You come back from that, and it's New England at home, Seattle at home, on the road Miami, which you would say, oh, who cares? The Dolphins. But you go on the road to Miami. That's not easy to go on after those 2 tough games, and then you've got 4 division games to close out. So. For those everyone that says, that's like a what do they call those? The games that you look past. The trap games, like that's like
Miami
going down to Miami late November. Like
they might be
nice.
like a rabid animal by then. Like you don't know what they're capable of.
So it's gonna be fun. I'm excited to get into the grind of the regular season, to get into the weekly routine.
Good question. They're down.
All right, so we've got another question here from Right Him. This is a good one. I actually asked this to Ben in the beginning of the day when I was getting the show ready. So this training camp series from Fran, C-Mac, and Ben is the best intel. As much as I love hearing your takes from practice, the in-depth practice notes are a must-read. So, Wilt, appreciate you listening and reading. Go and check out our practice notes every single day. Again, tomorrow, the last one. So Tuesday, the last one until next year. But, Fran, I wanted to follow up with you on a question that I asked on Twitter about Jim Schwartz using a 3-4 look and a 10-10-10, since the strength of the Eagles' defense lies in the defensive line and DBs. Real quickly, before I continue the question, anything with a 10-10-10, you've got to kind of take with a grain of salt. And I know Will knows this, but just want to explain it again. Because the defense at that point is giving the offense a look that they want to see. So Doug Peterson, the offensive coaching staff, says, hey, we want to see some odd front looks. Defense says, yep, sure. For this period, we're going to give you some odd looks. So anyway, I wanted to bring that up before we continue the question. Again, the strength of the Eagles' defense lies in the D-line and DBs. Do you think Jim Schwartz could use a 3-4 front in dime personnel? So 5 defensive linemen and 6 DBs as a new NASCAR package. You might hear that and say, well, what are you talking about? So the defensive line would be Fletcher Cox, Malik Jackson, Tim Jernigan, Brandon Graham, and we'll say Derek Barnett, with Malcolm Jenkins and Avonte Maddox as quasi-linebackers over the ball, and then you've got your corners and your safeties to round out the 11. How would that look dictate the offensive line protection scheme was the question from Wilt. So I posed this to Ben because I was like, all right, Ben's gonna Ben likes the big philosophical questions.
You can tell he's deep in thought now.
He's deep in thought now. I know there's a couple different ways we can kind of go with this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different directions with this question. The traditional dime packages are 4-1-6. You usually want to have one linebacker out there as opposed to having a 5-man front and 6 defensive backs. You usually need that linebacker to be a second-level defender to still counteract the running back on the field on the offensive side. But that's the name of the game in the NFL. You want your speed and your pass rushers out there, and you want your guys that can cover. And you get to third and medium, third and long. That's pretty much what every defensive coordinator is doing with their scheme, is getting guys that can cover and guys that can rush the passer. Now, the ins and outs and kind of the chess match with it, can you get the 5 front with 6 playing behind you? Sure, it's different. We've done some 5-over-5 looks where we have five guys down on the line of scrimmage. Traditionally, that isn't with 6 defensive backs. It may be like a 5-1-5 type of defense. But again, the looks on the front may not always be what you see either.
Right.
Because there's a lot of reduced fronts where it's a 4-3 defense, but that one defensive end is just scooted inside.
Right.
That linebacker's down on line of scrimmage. It looks like a 3-4, but it's actually a 4-3 with a reduced front with your Sam linebacker down on the line of scrimmage. I feel like the look of defensive lines is one of the most misconstrued things from fans. Even just like certain defenses like Dom Capers runs or Wade Phillips, where it's actually a 4-3 under, but it looks like an odd front.
Right.
So it's actually like a 3-4 single gap scheme. So it gets a little too convoluted in there. Whether you're two gapping and single gapping, and whether you have 4 guys on the line or 5 guys on the line, or whether it's a reduced front with your backer down.
A lot of the 5D line stuff you'll see in today's NFL, but it's more of a bare look.
Yes, yeah.
And that's more to stop the run, prevent double teams, prevent pulling, stuff like that. So you wouldn't necessarily see that in a dime package. So that's why, to me, if you're going to start talking about, all right, how are we going to affect protection schemes, if you're going to go 5D lineman, you're not going 3D tackles. You're saying, all right, like Josh Sweat, you get in there.
Right.
But
I guess to answer his question, how does this change protection if they had just the 5D lineman?
Sure.
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
You're still going to have to set a mic point. You're still going to have to slide a direction. You're still going to have to account for the 5 most dangerous if you're the offensive line. Maybe a bit of a different front, but it's nothing crazy, exotic, psycho defense, amoeba, guys walking around, moving around. That's much harder to dictate and decide protection than just having a 5 defensive lineman front to him.
You're probably just thinking, what offensive line is going to be able to handle protecting that left to right one-on-one?
In theory, that's what it is you're creating one-on-ones. And that's the beauty of that 5-over-5 look.
Right.
Yeah, it's look, it's gonna be fun watching this defensive line because I think you're gonna see it come out in waves. Those guys are gonna rotate it out. We've seen a lot of we've seen the depth this summer along that defensive line. I think that'll do it, guys.
I did have one stat here. Cam Johnston, 1-for-1 passing today. Not gonna say how it happened.
I think they were a little funny.
Well, but I learned he's left-handed.
Yep.
That was the thing.
1-for-1. I'll check the passer rating when I get back to my desk. But
yesterday during the 10-10-10, Ben
sure
and I were walking out,
iced.
and Ben made a point that we don't do enough in like the media world of just evaluate, like analyzing special teams and like all the different things that kickers and punters are working through during the course of practice. And I don't want to steal your thunder.
It's not even special teams. I'm literally meaning the specialists, the kickers, and just the detail they're going through. And I would just like them to vocalize.
Here comes a golf analogy.
Yeah, kind of what they're going through and just the details of their kicking. And I watch them pretty closely sometimes, and I see Cam Johnson going with a 1-step setup, a 2-step setup, the different ways he drops the nose of the ball on his foot, the different spins he could get, the way it bounces. I want to know what their thought process is and what they're working on. Otherwise, you just see those kickers out in that third field kicking the ball around, you just think they're the specialists kicking it. They're working on things. It's as detailed as golf swings. And if your feet are like this, and suddenly that next rep, you put that front toe out, something different happened. You can move your hands forward, change your grip, change your posture, your follow through, your backswing. Same thing with kicking. We just have no concept on what they're working on. But I promise you they're working on things. I would just like to know and to be a little bit more transparent and kind of let people know your thought process on, yes, I'm trying to get a bounce here. Oh, I'm trying to get a spiral kick here. Oh, I'm trying to get a sidewind spin. I'm trying to get it to check. Oh, I'm hitting a directional kick. There's so much to it, but we just don't have any concept over what they're thinking.
Well, that's why I rely on you. When you and I do go golfing together and I put one like 30 yards into the woods, I say, Ben, like, what did I do there?
I don't know, but there's a lot of things we can look at that may be affected why that went.
We'll have to check the
100 yards in the woods. Yeah.
All right, so I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Again, we'll be back tomorrow for our final training camp recap. Wednesday, Bob Stern breaking down the Dallas Cowboys. You don't want to miss that. Really about a 45-minute conversation. I think 30 minutes or so on that Dallas offense. So a lot to talk about with the Cowboys, the big rivals in the NFC East. All right, that'll do it again. For everybody here at the NovaCare Complex, I'm Fran Duffy. We'll talk to you tomorrow.